Hi everyone, I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to check this little guy right here, which is called Shanling M1S, which ditched that Android operating system in favor of a much simple touch interface. It usually goes for 229 bucks, but for a limited time you can get it at a small discount, and you can check my links that I left below if you don't want to miss that deal. And before I move forward, I just want to say that please don't mistake it's a very small form factor with poor performance, because in many ways it sounds like its bigger brother Shanling M3 Ultra, which I reviewed not too long ago. If I would complain just a little bit, then that will surely be about its looks. It's a little unusual having a widescreen display. It's like holding a digital audio player sideways, and of course having those play, pause, next and previous buttons on its front panel. Other than that, we're looking at a fully CNC machined aluminum case with two glass sheets covering its back and front. Everything you see is made from aluminum and glass, so the build quality is impressive. And it's in line with all Shanling devices. When it comes to connectivity, you have a 3.5mm and a 4.4mm balanced outputs on top, a volume wheel which acts as an on-off button on the left, and a microSD card slot and USB Type-C connection on its right. There are no additional ports on the bottom, making it an ergonomic little unit. They went with a 2.8-inch LCD screen, which is sharp enough with that 286 pixels per inch. You can tilt it at 180 degrees if you please, but I like having my headphone jacks on top, so I left it in the original position. It's bright and vibrant, and I was able to see its UI in sunny days, so no complaints in here. On the inside, things are getting considerably more interesting. First of all, it no longer has an Android operating system. It has a much smaller 2.8-inch LCD screen, so of course all those bubbles and all that UI of Android will look very weird on such a small display. This is just an offline music player, so it doesn't have any streaming capabilities. You cannot install any kind of third-party apps, and it doesn't have any kind of ROM memory, so it relies only that micro SD card slot, theoretically supporting cards up to 2 terabytes in size. I used a SanDisk 256 gig and it worked great. Library update was pretty fast on this one, thanks to a faster Ingenic X2000 system on chip. Although you cannot install third-party apps, it has Wi-Fi connectivity, it is DLNA equipped, and it supports Apple AirPlay. So you can play music from your third-party apps installed on your iPhone, such as Apple Music, Spotify, Qobuz, Tidal, and many more, all of which worked just fine. Shanling went with a ES9038 Q2M mobile chip, which is currently the flagship ESS Sabre silicon for mobile devices. They went with two Rycore op amps, which are working as headphone amplifiers, providing almost 250 milliwatts on its balanced output and 150 milliwatts on its single-ended output, which is actually a lot of power considering its size and its 106 grams weight. I think there is more than enough power on top, not only for sensitive IEMs and portable headphones, but also for several desktop dynamic and planar headphones, which I'll be testing in a minute. The component selection is very similar to that of its bigger brother M3 Ultra, so I expect a very similar performance. It can work as a Bluetooth sender and also as a receiver, supporting the LDAC codec, and this fellow right here can act as a dedicated desktop DAC in case you need it. Alright guys, this is pretty much it, and let's check how it actually performs. Sound-wise, it still boggles my mind how they did it, because usually when I'm testing such palm-sized units, I'm thinking about common MP3 players, I'm thinking about iPods that don't have audiophile qualities, I'm not thinking about resolution, transparency, airiness, fast transients. That would never happen. But M1S goes against all odds because I find it actually quite transparent. It's clean sounding enough. But most interesting of all, I don't find it at all aggressive or forced sounding. Everything that has to do with treble is actually quite smooth, relaxing, something that I would rarely say about ESS Sabre equipped digital audio players. And in many ways, it actually reminds me a lot about the sound of that Shanling M3 Ultra, which is double the price but sounds more or less the same. This one has a great equilibrium in between bass, mid-range and treble, but the bass output will definitely feel stronger, bolder, faster sounding in a way. And usually I would call names as visceral and punchy, units that have a few kilograms, a few spare matches under their belts, but I'm not kidding when I'm saying that M1S is punchy, visceral, impactful sounding, and that was happening even with desktop planar magnetic headphones put on electronica tunes, so it was always keeping up with that kind of music. I didn't feel that it was lacking behind or that the transients weren't as fast as I like them to be, and it didn't feel like listening to a $230 unit, and slowly but surely it became one of the best sounding offline music players that I tried as of yet. In many ways, it was approaching the performance of the Fire M11S and Shanling M6 Ultra. Of course, those are more powerful and they have a bigger headroom, but other than that, this was exactly as clean, as technical sounding. It always kept up with fast dynamics, but without becoming aggressive or fatiguing. Moving on to dynamics and to transients, for me, this is the most important part because I cannot stand slow, mellow, and polite sounding portable or desktop equipment. You'll always see on my table some fast, impactful sounding gear because this is what I like. And I do think that fast sounding units can sound fast, slow, or mellow, but not the other way around because soft sounding units and slow sounding units will sound just like that. They couldn't go faster. So clearly transients and fast transients are very important, and when I was listening to Tempest and Chocolate Chip Trip by Tool, I was with a pair of Meze Elite on my head and I was immediately started smiling. Although I understand the limitations of such a small unit, especially in terms of power and headroom, I was impressed by how well it was going through all that madness. The drum solo was powerful, it was very defined, and I was simply crowning it as an impressive unit in terms of speed and impact and bass slam. Actually, there are a few units that are considerably more expensive, but those didn't impress me as well in terms of bass slam and fast transients, and those are Hibi RS2 and Fire M11S, which were impressive but not as good as M1S. It did justice to rock and electronica tunes, even with a few planar headphones, and that rarely happens with such small devices. The second thing that impressed me was definitely is the tail retrieval, or how clean and how transparent it sounded. It might sound weird at first, but if you still don't own a desktop DAC, then it can easily replace you an entry-level DAC like a topping D10S, like SMSL C200, because it sounds more or less the same. So I started listening to some jazz classics like Rebecca Pigeon, and I immediately observed that it provided a very long vibration of her voice. So that usually happens with good digital tone converters. I observed that there was plenty of information on the micro and macro scale, like hands touching those piano keys, guitar plugs. All that felt clean, but without being fatiguing or fake sounding. And this is definitely one of the strongest skills of the little M1S. When Pink Panther by Stereo Play started playing, I observed that I could focus on the percussion work that was happening much deeper into the mix. I could focus on that drummer that didn't feel really overshadowed by the big orchestra, so always remaining in plain sight, always remaining in focus. With less than perfect recordings, which is still the biggest majority of my audiophile diet, I observed that it was not piling the notes on top of each other, so there was still plenty of separation left. I felt the inception points and decay of musical notes, which usually happens with desktop components. There was another thing which I liked, but not as much as the Transients and detail Retrieval, and that is layering, depth, and soundstage. First and foremost, it didn't sound as a common MP3 player like an iPod, so there is no clutter, there is no muddiness when listening to music. There is enough note separation, especially when listening with some open back planar headphones. I can walk around my tunes, no problem. I can feel sounds in their individual air bubbles, but still it didn't sound like a high-end portable digital audio player because it wasn't that big sounding. It was not very precise in its location and it didn't have that amazing depth. When I was listening to Two Cellos, Highway to Hell by Two Cellos, I felt that those cellos were interplaying with each other, but I didn't feel that one was to my right, one to my left, but much closer to each other. So clearly I was not experiencing the same sound that I have with high-end electronics, with high-end headphone amplifiers and DACs, so it was much closer, more upfront, not as airy sounding. So it's good in here, not really bad, but not really outstanding. The last thing that I want to talk about is power and noise floor. So I went directly on its 4.4mm balanced output, high gain, maximum power with the most sensitive IEMs that I have at my disposal, and there were no noises whatsoever playing in the background. And that is a big deal because a few years ago, 5 years, 8 years ago, you needed to invest into a very expensive, uber high-end portable digital audio player to get a very similar performance. That is no longer the case. You don't need to spend, a lot of money to get a noiseless performance, and that makes me very, very happy. When it comes to power output, I went directly with the jaw, so I installed some planar magnetic headphones, and at 75 out of 100, it was already driving these two, no problem. Dynamics were crazy. It was kicking me in the nuts. When it comes to bass delivery, it was very powerful, very punchy sounding in the bass. And except for that limited soundstage and depth, it was driving them absolutely amazing, close to maximum potential. And that is something that, just look at it, so small and can drive planar headphones. With Sennheiser HD 800S, I was at 85 maybe out of 100, so clearly it can drive plenty of desktop headphones. Actually, from my big headphone collection, only 3 headphones weren't driven to their maximum potential. Susvara, LCD4 and LCD5, and that is basically all. Moving on to frequency response, you should prepare for a stronger bass performance, especially in the mid bass, which adds some energy in here a little bit more compared to the rest of the frequency response. So you can hear that it's slightly elevated, that adds some warmth, some texture, some energy, some weight to the sound. So it's a fun type of sound. It's a little colorful because there is slightly more bass, a little bit more mid-range, and just less energy in the upper treble. So it's not linear, but it's mostly fun and engaging, and if you are a bass head, you'll love this one. It's not impressive only quantity-wise, but quality-wise as well, because it's a fast type of bass. It has fast decays when it needs to, so it will impress you in terms of speed as well, not only in terms of kick and impact. Its mid-range is not standing out as much, but still it's not really boring, linear, or thin sounding in the mid-range. It's not pushing forward all those vocals, it's not pushing forward string-based instruments, but it still adds some sparkle, some presence in the mid-range, so I do believe there is plenty of naturalness and organic matter in the mid-range. It tries to mimic the sound of the Shanling M3 Ultra in the mid-range, which was warm and smooth. This one is almost like that, but this one is better compared to something like a Hobby RS2 and a Fio M1S, which felt flatter and too linear for my taste in terms of mid-range delivery, mid-range performance. The naysayer was definitely its treble performance, because it was clean, defined and extended, but it was refusing to be aggressive or fatigue wing sounding. Although aggressive as Sinner by Drowning Pool was not clenching my fists, it was not bruising my eardrums, and it was sharp enough to be called clean, but not sharp enough to be called aggressive. As for my conclusions, Shanling ditched that Android operating system in favor of offline music playback, and this is where it performed pretty much on the same level with Shanling M3 Ultra at half its price point. So you are paying for an amazing feature set with that M3 Ultra, and you are paying for pure sound quality with M1S. While third-party apps are not really present, you can still stream music via Apple AirPlay. I tried via Qobuz and Tidal, and that worked just great. Sound-wise, I can complain only about its depth and Soundstage, which were so-so. Other than that, it was impressive even with desktop planar headphones. It was fast, impactful, it was fun sounding, and it will definitely impress a music lover and not so much a snobby audiophile. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. Don't forget to be positive, and I'll see you around.